It's a long way home from Germany, but it helps when you get a W. The Chiefs come away with that win. Where does that leave them at the bye? Well, it starts at the top of the AFC. We're going to cover where this team is, what goes on, and what is the surprise of this first half today on Locked On Chiefs Live.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. It is Victory Monday. We're going to enjoy that for the Tuesday show because your Chiefs got out of there alive and are on their way back. Actually, have been gotten home to Kansas City. Ready for this bye week that I think is well-deserved. We're going to talk about where they are taking stock right now. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. They make every moment count and make it super, super fun. Get new customers right now. Get that deal of $150 in bonus bets with a $5 win on the money line. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're going to get started today as well. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. NFL33.com, where you want to get all your information about the rest of the league and the college game, what's coming in the draft, the whole 9 yards, and RGR football, where we break down film and give you another view of what is Chiefs Kingdom. This is Chris Clark, my partner from Chiefs Corner, where you can get all the information about, in particular, passing efficiency, third down, the cap, all the things that I need him to straighten me out on every week to week to week. For those of you that are new and may have seen a billboard around Kansas City, we welcome all of you new listeners. We do this live as often as we can, and today we are able to. So make sure that you like and sub and hit the bell over on YouTube because we're free on every single platform, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everywhere you get a podcast, you can get it for free 5 days a week, if not more. And that is true of the entire Locked On Podcast Network. So check out another show for your next listen, whether it's what's coming up. Yes, the Eagles are on the radar, but there's a lot going on across the league. We appreciate you. And this game, at the end of the day, took me in a direction that I feel this team should be satisfied with. I'm certainly satisfied with. And in the end, they end up right about where we thought they were going to be in our preseason predictions, going to the bye in the lead in the AFC.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we were hoping that they would be. Right now, they're the number one seed in the AFC, and that's not going to change. Actually, now that I think about it, it may change over the bye week if the Baltimore Ravens win, because they will have another game up on Kansas City, but eventually that will shift back as long as the Chiefs continue to win and the Ravens win. It doesn't really matter because at that point you're looking at conference games. That's how that is working out. But if they get one more win, they'll be 8-2 versus 7-2. So I think they may move into first place for temporarily for about 4 weeks. Lots to talk about, though, and you talk about where the Chiefs team is. I actually just wrote an article about this on Chiefs Corner. You can go find it right now, talking about the stats, looking at the team stats overall, looking at where the offense was after 9 games, where the offense is now, where the defense was after 9 games, where the defense is now, scoring and turnovers as well. So looking at all.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a good time to take that stock as the team as a whole. Certainly later coming up in the show, we're going to talk about what the offense can take away from the Germany game against the Dolphins to use into the second half. And clearly what a surprise the defense has been for this league. And honestly, what that does for you, I think goes a long way. But we have to take a step back and look at it as a whole. We came into this season really focused on the wide receiver position because for the first time in recent memory, and honestly any memory I can remember of Andy Reid, 7 receivers were on this roster to start the season, and we've seen it not really expand much since then. We're still searching. And so the thing that you got to remember is, yes, there's been ups and downs, but the thing that has really stayed the same is until you have a wide receiver one, you don't have one. And this team doesn't. They've got a couple of options. They've messed around. They've tried some things out. At the end of the day, they have a crew of guys that are potential leaders in that room, and no one has stepped up to the plate. That's the one concern that I have at this point in this bye week, early here in the bye week. We'll see what else happens as everybody kind of gets a chance to take a breath. Who takes that mantle and is ready to step up and lead? And that's the big question that's going to stand out to me for the next week.
If I had a big question that I was going to be asking questions on, it is, what is the offense doing with Andy Reid, and why are they continuing to change things? And what I mean by that is Rashee Rice finally got, I think, the most snaps at wide receiver this week. The problem with that is He did lead the team with receiver snaps. Receiver snaps. The problem is half of his snaps were running snaps, and if when you get 41 snaps on offense and you only get 2 targets the entire game, that's a problem. Pretty sure he had some more time that he should have been out there. But my point in the matter is that you have to have him out there for more than just half of the passing snaps that he's in the game for. You need to have him out there for 2/3 of the passing snaps. He is one of your best players and one of your better wide receivers on the team, and you need to use him in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the touchdown was a big play, but he was also moving the ball. And at the end, it's not so much the snaps for him, but it is the targets. I agree with you. When Justin Watson's getting targeted more than twice of what the guy who's been able to produce for you is getting, I think that is a problem. I like that they tried to go to Sky more. Thought Sky made a couple of good catches. The third obviously wasn't on the same page still with the quarterback. We'll talk about the quarterback coming up later in the show because I do want to talk about pressure. But it comes down to, that's one thing that everybody can take a breath now this week, kind of step back, hopefully watch a little bit of extra film and get an idea of what aren't you seeing in the moment. And in years past, we've been able to get kind of a boost from what the bye week does. We'll talk about the Eagles as the week goes on. Matt Derrick will be here with us tomorrow, but right here, I think that's probably the best thing, is to be able to just take a breath and take stock of where they are as a roster, not necessarily as the coach is telling them what they need to see.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of things that they need to figure out. And like you said, we'll talk about the quarterback later, but that's going to be one of the guys that's got to get in there and see the film. And I said this on Twitter earlier, and I just want to say it now. I think that they're in a better position now just because you're in a situation where I think you have the best – I still think you have the best quarterback in football in Patrick Mahomes. You have one of the best coaches in Andy Reid. I think those two guys can get it figured out on the offensive side of the ball. And get things going a little bit better than what they have so far, versus being in a situation where last year I don't think they really had the defense to really change and limit points as the season went on. I do think that having an offense struggling at this time of year is better than having the defense struggle, because I think they can get it figured out.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like the brain power there is probably leaning in your favor. But that offense is coming up. We're going to talk about the quarterback, et cetera. And before that, we need to get to the defense too, because I think this is probably the standout thing that we aren't giving it enough attention right now. I want to get to that next, but first, a message from how you can get into the action right here.
And I want to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. This week on PrizePicks, you can be looking at, do you think Joe Burrow is going to be throwing more than 2 pass touchdowns next week? Or, maybe you want to make a bet for tonight. Does Justin Herbert have more than 2 passing touchdowns? That's definitely something you could take a look at. Or what is Keenan Allen going to do for the Chargers? Lots of different ways you can go about this, and different players you can look at and use. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL using code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
Now, if fantasy sports was that easy, I'd be winning a whole lot more. I'm just going to say that at this point. Thank you, Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, for getting your acts together mostly. That's a whole different show, folks. But before we get to the offense that's coming up in the next segment, got to talk about what I think has really caught the league off guard, is that once again, a young group. We know all about the Fab Five in the secondary, but they're not alone. It's Leo Chanel playing more snaps. It's George Karlaftis' continued evolution. This defense is catching the league off guard because they weren't ready for it, especially with drama with Chris Jones. I think it really set the defense in a good position to surprise their opponents this year. And let me just say, as somebody who likes to look defense first, it's encouraging for me that you've gotten to this point and they haven't found a way to really break this defense down yet. Yes, you had the late addition of Amenahue, which I think bolsters the pass rush in a different way that if you had a plan, maybe it wasn't going to work out anyway. But this is the basis. And Patrick Mahomes said this post-game last night that this is the kind of defense that allows the offense in this particular year where it's struggling to find its identity to have that time to move on and still win ball games. And that's what Patrick Mahomes is emphasizing right now.
Yeah, and they're healthy for the most part. Obviously, you're missing Nick Bolton, and they should be getting him back, I would think, probably in about a month. Probably early December would be my guess. And with him coming back, this defense is going to be just even more stout. I mean, I think that you missed Bolton at times yesterday in the running game. I'm not trying to take anything away from Tranquil. He did a great job. But he can't shed blockers the way Bolton can. And Bolton still gets stuck at times too. So that's something to look at. But overall, this defense is playing phenomenal. And, you're missing one of the better players from last year in Nick Bolton. And they're still playing lights out. They held the Dolphins to 14 points. And you could argue that they should have held the Dolphins to 10 points. We won't get into the Chris Jones penalty. But regardless, you're sitting here in a situation where they're continuing to get pressure. And they're getting pressure in different ways. And Spags is throwing pressure at people from different directions, and they don't have a clue where it's coming from most of the time, it seems like. And one of the things that really stood out was watching the pressure get home to Tua at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to share my screen here. For those of you that are not subscribed on YouTube and you're hearing this on audio, please come over to the YouTube platform and get subscribed there because it allows me to show you some things visually that you can't see on the audio podcast. And I think they're important. So if you get a chance, make sure you subscribe on the YouTube platform as well as the audio side, because this is what it comes down to. And this is, I think, illustrating your point really, really well. I have this sorted by PFF's grade, which is, we all know, a little bit hit or miss, grain of salt, the whole 9 yards. But when you look at it, it really illustrates what's going on in Kansas City right now for me. When you look at who pass rushed the best in terms of their grades, the top is Jalen Watson, who came and ended up sacking the quarterback and was a nice blitz off the corner. Second is Drew Tranquil, who got pressure up the middle, again, on the blitz situation. Trent McDuffie, we all know that he is a considerable blitzer. Honestly, he's pointing to the fact now that I think Trent McDuffie may have surpassed L'Jarius Sneed as a corner blitz. We'll get to that discussion coming up. But that's the variability, and I think that's something we haven't seen yet. Yes, the front is getting there. If you flip this list, you can see the most pressure produced is, again, George Karlaftis continuing his power production. I think increasing his hand usage and getting himself to a viability that is only going to continue at this point. Then Amenahue, Dana Jones, the front four doing their jobs, getting the most pressure, but it's just the diversity that Spags is able to do and was able to deploy in Germany is just, I think, the tip of the iceberg here and something we're going to continue to see after the bye.
The frustrating thing with PFF stats is, and I wish that they show this because I was looking before the show, they're not showing double teams anymore. I guess maybe they didn't ever show double teams, but that's a problem. And the reason I bring it up, some people I've seen are saying that Chris Jones isn't really doing much this season. I guarantee you he had more double teams yesterday, and he has probably every single game that he's been playing, and you don't see that in these stats because it is they're consistently trying to take him out of the ball game, and you're not going to see it here. You're not going to see how many double teams he's taking, and that actually really changes the picture that you would see. Karlaftis isn't going to be as successful if Jones is not getting double teamed, because Karlaftis could be a guy that they would double team instead.
Very, 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 very much agree with you. It takes that front. And again, what this does is the Amenahue addition now gives you 3 viable pass rushers, and that's not to take away from Mike Dana, but Mike Dana is known in Kansas City. I think nationally across the league, they don't feel that they can devote much doubles to Mike because you have Chris and you have Charles Amenahue and you have George Karlaftis. So I think Mike has the ability right now, and he's been producing because he isn't getting those doubles. He's staying singled up for the most part. And I think that's advantageous for him and obviously advantageous for the front because they're producing so well. This is another game of 16 dropbacks, and I think Tua had 16 pressures on 32 dropbacks, was it? I have to double check that.
Yeah,
but that's what I thought the
close
number
to
was.
that. Really quick, I know we don't normally do that this time of year, but this time of the show, but I want to comment on this since we have the passing grades up. No, we shouldn't be concerned. FAU is getting the least amount of snaps because you have Omenihu there, you have Dana, you have Chris Jones, you have all those different guys that are getting after the passer. You have Karlaftis. If one of those guys goes down, which we're not hoping for, obviously, then he will start getting more snaps. But it's to be expected that he's not getting the snaps this year. Sorry, I just want to address that really quick.
No, I think you're absolutely right. When we go back to my pre-draft evaluation, for those of you that were with us on Rogue Analytics and the Athletic Matrix and everything, he has the athletic prowess, but he needed refinement. He played in a very specific area, a wide 7, wide 9 alignment at K-State, and we knew he was going to have to make some adjustments, and he had a way to go. I do think, like we've seen a leap for George, I think we'll see a leap for Felix as well.
Yeah, and it may be week, it may be year 3. It may not be year 2. George was ahead of the curve when it came to FAU. So the other question then it becomes when you start looking at his snaps and looking at what he's able to give you is how are they using him and in what situations are they using him? You're absolutely right. He was more of a wide 7, wide 9 type guy. That's not necessarily how Kansas City has been deploying their defensive ends a ton. But the other side of it is I do think that he will continue to get maybe a couple more snaps once the later part of the season and the playoffs get here. When you're trying to give some of your other guys a little bit more rest, I think he's going to get more playing time, and I think you'll see it pay off.
I agreed. And when it comes to grades, I want to flip over to the coverage side of it because this is also what I think is sneaking up on the league, and it is Trent McDuffie out top of the coverage grade. At one point this season, he was the highest graded corner in the league. That has fallen off, but that's okay. He led this game in terms of PFF grades. But one guy that I meant to mention last night when we were live, and I didn't get to it, was Justin Reed, who I thought played well in control, manned his zones, laid the wood when he could. He had a couple of opportunities. He laid a couple of big hits, and I thought that was significant in setting the tone for that ballgame. And Chris agrees with me. He can't tell you right now because he's muted, but he really
not only did he lay big hits, but one of the big hits that he had was a route going on an in-breaking route, and he hit to him right under the shoulder, which the only reason I'm pointing it out is that is the perfect form tackle. He didn't hit him high. He didn't take his helmet to him. He did exactly what you're supposed to do, and you're not going to get a chance to see many people that are going to be laying the wood like he did on that specific play.
Agreed. And here's what's really interesting. When you look at coverage grades, and for those of you who think I'm crazy and think that PFF is the end-all, be-all of grades, then let's take them for you here. Top 6 graded players in this contest. Second-year player, vet, second-year player, and rookie. 4 of the top 6 were second-year guys or younger. And that is, again, where this defense is going and why it's allowed to do that. It has more speed, it has more tenacity, and it has that youth. That's something they're going to have to double down on. I think it will work out for him, but you got to keep that at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here trying to look. I'm scrolling through Twitter right now trying to find what I was looking for. I saw somebody tweet this out earlier, and it was basically showing that Tyreek Hill had, on average, I think, 2.5 yards of separation, which is insane for what Tyreek Hill is normally doing this time of year. He's usually got 4 to 5 yards of separation. The only player on the Dolphins, I think, that was over 3 was Durham Smythe. And I'm sorry, if you're Kansas City and you're giving up 5 yards to Durham Smythe, I think you're going to be okay.
I get you. Well, I think the defense is squarely how they got here. The question is, how do they take the step forward? And that is by righting the ship on the offensive side, just like Patrick Mahomes has been talking about. We're going to get to the details and how do you use this as a springboard coming up after this. But I got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel, because especially this week, when there isn't a Chiefs game to really lock onto, you can get into the action on a number of different ways and look at other teams around the league. Obviously, it was a great matchup last night between Bills and Bengals, but that kind of thing is what you can start looking at now. And right now on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, you can get in the action by getting yourself $150 in bonus bets by playing any winning $5 money line bet. Just put $5 on a money line. You win that, your team wins, you win. You get $150 in bonus bets applied to your account. So you can use those anywhere. But if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, now is the time, because that's for new customers, and it's time right now to get into that action. You can do spreads, the props, unders, overs, money line, the whole 9 yards. It's all available at FanDuel.com/lockedon. And kick this NFL season into high gear here as we approach the bye. Really going to be excited about that. It's at FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. For me, what I'm betting on is the over. that this Chiefs offense is going to get to the point where they're scoring over 28 points a game. It's been a bit of a lull, and as good as the defense has been at holding the margins and the differentials down so that they keep getting W's, we're going to continue to move towards, you got to get the offense kicked back into gear. And I think that is something that just kind of coalesces somewhere between now. This is a little bit earlier of a bye week than they've had in years past. Somewhere between now, week 9, 10, whatever, and 13-ish is where I feel like the offensive weapons that are so young and so inexperienced in this group are going to start to feel like they understand their role and where to be and how to be. And I think that's what I'm looking forward. It's about the leadership that Patrick Mahomes brings, but it's also about the demand that you step into that role and you get your stuff together.
No, I agree. And I think that you continue to look at the young wide receivers and you hope that they continue to grow in what they're able to do and how they're able to see the field, because that's what's going to get them to be more effective on the field, is that they see the field better. They find the right places and zones, and they're where Patrick expects them to be. And, he said it as much as Andy Reid. Well, not Andy Reid, but he said it himself, that he needs to trust his guys. He needs to throw the ball to the wide receivers. And he said that he's going to continue to do that regardless of whether they have drops or not. And I do want to point out, Kansas City had 0 drops last game, which is a little bit of an improvement considering how things have gone in the past. The other thing I want to point out is if you go look at PFF stats, one of the things that really stands out to me is Mahomes continues to try to throw the ball to Justin Watson and Marquez Valdes-Scantling in situations where it's more of a jump ball type situation. And while Watson may be able to do that at times, that's not his strength. It's definitely not MVS's strength. If you're going to throw contested balls, you need to do it to somebody that is going to go fight for the ball. And right now, I don't know that there's somebody on the team that you would really feel that comfortable with, other than a guy that isn't even here right now, and that's Justin Ross.
And unfortunately, I don't think that's really the staple of what this offense needs to be. I think they're trying to find ways to do that on occasion as the changeup, right? But what MVS and Justin Watson do well is that kind of streaking type downfield threat. Now, what I think they need to get back to a little bit more is not necessarily just low mesh, which we talked about on our GR post game. If you guys missed that, low mesh is a concept in the West Coast offense that should be a staple, and really hasn't been as much this season. But there's also the over. And you don't just have to stretch the field vertically. You can stretch it vertically and then break it off. It's a component of what the big wasp play was in the Super Bowl, but it's something that they're not doing enough of. We're not seeing those guys that have the speed drag themselves across the safety's face and draw that coverage. And I do think that is something that as we get into the second half of the season and certainly in the postseason, that they're going to have to use their speed targets to draw safety coverage, because that opens up Travis Kelce and it's going to help Rashee Rice, who shouldn't be running those routes. And it's going to help both Kadarius Toney, who should be attacking the seams, and Sky Moore, who should be doing a little bit of everything underneath out of the slot. Yeah,
and if you go back and watch Kadarius Toney yesterday, his one catch, that is not how I would expect Kadarius Toney to be getting his yards, is to breaking 3 tackles and bouncing off players. Nothing against Kadarius Toney. That's not his strong suit. That's not his game. But he was able to do it, and he shows something that this team has been sorely lacking. The other thing I would say is, why aren't you using more zone beaters? And what I mean by that is, why aren't you using, schemes that are sending, 2 or 3 targets into a zone at once? So you're in a situation where you're leveled in a specific zone. If you're doing something like that, that's going to attack the different areas of the zone, and you should be able to overwhelm the defense.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they're designed that way. I agree with you. I think that it's something that, again, will evolve, and you're trying to pull. I think you're trying to pull defenses out of that by giving them something else to concentrate. But so far, I don't think it's been terribly successful, because it's been difficult to see how much run you should be taking advantage of. Now, yesterday was a good uptick, back to 16 attempts for Isaiah Pacheco. The 4.1 yards per average wasn't bad. It isn't the 5+ that he's been in a number of ball games, but it's the volume there. And I know you were talking about Rashee Rice earlier, only getting 2 targets out of 40 some snaps, 20 of which were runs. I think that balance is still something that has to be doubled down on. The difference for me is, if you eliminate some of the mistakes in the passing game, I think what it'll turn out is you're going to see more 50 to 60 snaps on offense type games rather than what we have seen. And then I don't think the balance there is so distraught and so indicative of running too much or not giving enough targets away. I certainly would double down on a couple of guys. We'll talk about them in a second. But how do you feel about where the balance is in the offense right now?
I think it's something that they need to continue to work on, and I think that there was times yesterday, and Reed said it after in his press conference, on that third down on one play, he needs to run the ball, he needs to give it to the big guys, and expect that they're going to go get it. And you have made it abundantly clear you're not going to run a quarterback sneak, and okay, fine, you're not going to do QB sneak, but run the ball in that situation, give your line a chance to make it, and I think that they would have paid off in that scenario. I was actually on our GR yesterday, and I agree with what Dan said is, they knew what play was coming. They knew on 3rd and 1 that they were likely going to be trying to hit Kelsey. And obviously, if the defense knows that play is coming, it's not going to work. And generally speaking, this offense has gotten too predictable, and that's something that they need to fix. And, you talk about Rashee Rice getting a lot of snaps or getting to a point where you get 50 or 60 offensive snaps. Rashee Rice played 2/3 of the offensive snaps yesterday. I'm not complaining about that number. I'm complaining about the number of pass snaps that he was in. But, you get to a point where they've got to make adjustments, and that's one of them in my mind that they need to do.
Yeah, and that's fair. That balance will come. And to get to the short yardage, Silverback and a number of folks in the chat have been talking about it live. And folks, we're not going to take a ton of questions because we had a lot to get through today. I'll be live on RGR later. We'll take questions all night long over there. And we'll try to get back to that here on this show later in the week. But the short yardage has been kind of a conundrum. Yesterday was illustrated by a 3rd and 1 that they chose not to run again. And this is, I think, both confirmed and because of the fact that you decide to move off from a fullback. Mike Burton was successful for you when you used him in the correct way, and you didn't just hand it to him in a dive like we saw all of last season. And unfortunately, he's been successful in Denver as well, blocking well, getting those short yardage things for them. But it becomes about dedication. Do you want to spend the practice time practicing short, whether it's goal to go or not, destination runs that just bring out power, that don't feed the rest of your offense? And I think that's where the distinction comes in for Andy Reid. There's so much in this playbook. Spending time in short yardage, especially in the run side of it, isn't something that he's willing to do in a given week when he's trying to prepare for an opponent.
Well, and that may be true, but at the same time, he needs to, and we talked about this yesterday as well, he needs to change what he's doing. And I don't mean he needs to adapt, basically, is what it comes down to. Where's his innovation this year? We haven't seen it. The innovation has not been there on offense, and that's part of what the problem has been. Is he has usually been a guy that will adapt something, will bring in something as an innovation, and the rest of the league will copy it and use it for the next 2 or 3 years. Several years ago, that was the jet sweep. Obviously, that play is not working for Kansas City as well right now, and that's fine. But find something else that you can bring in and, go search college ranks, go search whatever you want, but go find something and innovate something different, or this offense is going to continue to stay stagnant.
Yeah, agreed. And it feels to me a little bit, and I'm not an expert on this reference, but my kids are super into Harry Potter. This feels like Andy Reid in the Chamber of Secrets. Like all of a sudden it's going to open up maybe later than we are used to seeing. There hasn't been the pitch passes and those things in the first half of the season, but it feels like there's a bulk of other plays that are going to come out after the bye. And honestly, I think right before the playoff stretch, just to give a lot of homework to any team in the playoffs. And it feels a little bit different to me, but they may be successful as well.
And maybe that's what they're saving it for. Maybe they're saving it for the Eagles. Maybe they're saving it for the stretch at this point. They figure getting to a point where you're, 8-1, 7-2, whatever, going into the bye week, I think you got to feel pretty good about that as a team. Maybe that's the way they're looking at it. Maybe they're just looking and saying, okay, well, we can do, we know we can be, in the number 1 seed, and this is how we're going to do this, and we're going to save some of this stuff for the playoffs and for the later part of the season. When you start facing teams because don't forget, you have games coming up. You have the Eagles, you have the Bengals, you have the Bills, you still got the Chargers again, and you got 2 against the Raiders, who I'm not saying are going to be good, but after watching yesterday's game against the Giants, I think they're going to be better than what we were expecting them to be.
Yeah, I have to think so too. And we're going to talk about the Eagles coming up here. First, tomorrow, we're going to have Matt Derrick on. Take a little look at how that team is dealing the bye, coming off of the big win, and where the organization is at. Then we're going to get into the rest of where they have to go position by position coming up later in the week as we start to look at the Eagles. Obviously, they are special. They have their whole they have a play just for their quarterback that the Chiefs are never, ever going to run. We'll talk about that coming up here in the future as well. But we appreciate you being here with us. Make sure you like and sub and hit that bell here on the YouTube platform. Sub over on Spotify and Audible. And for the love of because there's information on every team all the time. There's also getting into the draft season. I know for some other fan bases, draft is starting to become a hot topic. Check out NFL33.com for all of our work over there and my team, as well as the Locked On NFL Draft Dudes, all kinds of stuff here on the platform. And we appreciate you guys spending your time. I hope this week is a nice, smooth sailing coming off of that win. We'll have more for you tomorrow. Matt Derrick will be with us. And I hope that makes life a little bit easier. So thanks for being with us today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.